So tonight we have a few speakers tonight to talk about policing issues. So, we're coming here tonight in solidarity, hopefully building solidarity with each other about policing in the downtown east. So, this is coming out of a sweep that started on June 18th and doesn't end till September 8th. But these sweeps happen all across the city of Toronto. They happen in lots of neighborhoods, from Jane-Finch, Melbourne, Rexdale, Regent Park, Parkdale. They're happening everywhere. And they target communities. They target young men of color, poor people, homeless people, drug users, people living in poverty, Indigenous people. So tonight we're going to talk about that. And hopefully we leave here feeling in solidarity with each other, because part of it is about dividing us. It's about creating divisions amongst our communities.
So on the idea of unity, I want everyone to be mindful, telling your stories. I really want people to be able to tell their stories here. This is a safe room, because we're all here for the same reason, yeah? For sure, for sure. Yeah.
So we're going to have, so I also want to just acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. And not just acknowledge it, lots of people talk about that all the time, say we're on Indigenous land and acknowledge that. But we also have to acknowledge how, even thinking about the irony, about the millions of dollars spent on TAVIS and how we have over 1,000 missing and murdered Aboriginal women in this country, and how that millions of dollars could go into actually searching for them, looking for them, women who are actually from this community as well. So tonight we're going to talk about some of those ways in which this money could be better spent. So up first is Chris Williams, who is a Toronto-based activist, researcher, who specializes in policing issues. He's with the Osgood Society Against Institutional Injustice and Toronto Police Accountability Coalition, and he's going to give us an overview about TAVIS. So thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you one and all for being in attendance today. It's never had the opportunity to speak in Regent Park. I've played basketball here and ran around here back in my younger days, but I've never given a talk. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. I want to speak about policing as a means of social control generally. I want to speak about TAVIS specifically, and I want to also touch upon this whole issue of contact carding, which is rather near and dear to my heart, given that I'm in that wonderful police database, and given that I had the opportunity to do some journalistic work in this area as of last year. So I want to just begin briefly with a 90-second clip which sort of deals a little bit with these issues of contact carding, gratuitous harassment, and police intimidation, and then get into a talk about TAVIS specifically.
We're trying to be safety ambassadors. We're trying to help our community, man. Come on, leave us alone.
I've never been arrested, but yet I have a file this thick in Toronto Police database on me.
It's a fact, for example, that you have 10, 11, 12-year-old children entered into this database.
A file this big for someone who's never been arrested, it's an insult. After numerous times of being stopped for no reason, you start to feel an infringement upon your rights.
The information that's contained within this database is very much in accord with what you'd expect from a suspect description. It's not even to say that it's tolerated by high-level police officials. It's actually encouraged.
I'm concerned with these young men, 12, 13-year-olds, or even 17-year-olds who are getting stopped. They get their back up, they become suspect, it escalates and it turns into a minor arrest. In order for those type of things to stop, this type of carding practice has to stop.
I'm more likely to be scrutinized by the police than the next Paul Bernardo, Luca Magnotta, or the next Colonel Russell Williams.
Just slightly dramatic. It's just they jazzed it up a little bit for our sake. I want to begin with two stories and one concept in order to, I think, shed light on the true nature of what TAVIS is about. And the first story unfolded in December 2013 at York University, where there was an incident, or a number of incidents involving students who, for whatever reason, decided that they weren't set to take their exams, and who therefore concocted stories regarding robberies. They went to the police, claimed that they were robbed, and that's therefore the reason why they weren't able to take their exams. It was sort of a robbery hoax at York University. Now, one of the interesting aspects of that hoax is that the police in 31 Division, who are known for having a taste for criminalization and being heavy-handed, decided in the face of that hoax, and we're talking about criminal mischief when one makes a false accusation of robbery, the police decided to refrain from charging the involved individuals and to let the university handle the incident. There was a detective sergeant in 31 Division, Al Coulter, who stated, and I quote, "It's not really beneficial to us to lay any public mischief charges. It's not beneficial to us." Now, we're socialized to believe that the primary reference point for the police is the law. Right? If there's a violation of the law, then presumably the law enforcers are going to act upon that by issuing criminal charges. But in this case, it says it's not really beneficial for us to lay any public mischief charges. These individuals, being university students from nice, well-manicured suburbs, perhaps even fit the profile of the type of people who are usually placed on the criminal justice conveyor belt. So that's story number one. Story number two, in the exact same division and not very far from York University, involves an individual who's perhaps less affluent and less privileged than his counterparts at York University. And we're going back now to May 2007, when a young black male by the name of Fitzroy Osborne was walking in the Jane-Finch area along Driftwood Avenue, minding his own business, when two police officers connected with TAVIS called out to him. They told him, come over to the van. Fitzroy Osborne, being fed up with being harassed on an ongoing basis throughout the course of his teenage years and his adult years, kept walking. He basically told them, screw off, leave me alone. The police then got out of the van, followed him up an embankment towards a plaza where they confronted him. Now, Fitzroy Osborne was still protesting this police harassment, and in the course of so doing, a constable with 31 Division, with TAVIS, a constable by the name of Judy Grant, sort of got within about 3 feet of him. Fitzroy Osborne is like many of us, he gestures when he speaks. So he gestured, his hand made contact with her chest, and you wound up getting charged with assault police officer and causing a disturbance. And those charges, Justice Carol Brewer, who presided over the case in her infinite wisdom, decided to dismiss those charges. But the point of the story is that if one wants to understand policing through the prism of so-called crime control and through the prism of so-called law enforcement, one is going to be befuddled and bewildered and confused in the course of trying to make sense of those two examples. When you have university students who are engaged in clear-cut criminal activity, criminal mischief, who don't get charged with anything, and in contrast you have an individual who is walking down the street minding his own business and gets hit with two utterly bogus criminal charges, how do we understand that with reference to law enforcement? I would suggest that it's got to be understood in a dramatically different fashion, and there's an interesting concept which researchers of policing have formulated, and we're all familiar with it on an everyday level. This is sort of rendered in academic terms, and the concept is police property. Robert Reiner, in a book called The Politics of the Police, states, and this is his definition of police property, they are low-status, powerless groups whom the dominant majority see as problematic or distasteful. The majority are prepared to let the police deal with their property and turn a blind eye to the manner in which this is done. Examples would be vagrants, Skid Row alcoholic, the unemployed or casually employed residuum, youth adopting a deviant cultural style, ethnic minorities, gays, sex workers, and radical political organizations. And here's I think the main point. The prime function of the police has always been to control and segregate such groups, and they are armed with a battery of permissive and discretionary laws for this purpose. And so I would argue that if we, again, sort of displace the rhetoric of crime control and take this concept of police property and give it its proper central place, we can therefore make sense not only of this sharp contrast between how the York University students were dealt with and how Fitzroy Osborne was dealt with, but how police projects like TAVIS function in communities such as this. And I think that's the way TAVIS should be viewed. It should be viewed as a well-funded, highly visible means by which the police assert control over their quote-unquote property. Now, you know, the task on the part of the police to keep their property in line doesn't come cheap. If the Toronto police were strictly concerned with crime control, strictly concerned with serious criminality, their budget would be far more modest. But when you're engaged in the task of social control in a broad sense, that directed towards police property, you need a lot of money, you need a lot of resources. There's a lot of police property in the city. And that explains why the police have a budget of $1 billion. You don't need $1 billion for serious crime control, but you do need that for gratuitous harassment. It works out to be $354 for every human being in this city. You take the $1 billion divided by 2.8 million, $354 from you, thank you sir, $354 from you. People in the back, thank you for your $354. 51 Division specifically gets their expenditures, the gross expenditures are in the neighborhood of $30 million a year here in 51 Division. I think they have a total of 260 uniformed cops and about 15 civilian employees. So about 30 million for about 275 people. There may be other speakers who can speak about where that stands in relation to what's spent on job training, job creation, etc., etc. But I'm sure the other expenditures, social expenditures that actually build up communities rather than tear them down, I'm sure those expenditures would be considerably lower. So $1 billion overall, 30 for 51 Division, and $5 million a year for TAVIS specifically, which sort of leads to the question, what exactly does the public get in exchange for all of that money? Now, TAVIS specifically, as the name suggests, Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, is billed as a project centered around the promise of specificity. We're going to specifically go after people, violent individuals, who create mayhem in particular communities, and this is the logic that's going to govern our practices. At TAVIS, at its inception, and TAVIS came into being in early 2006, a common misconception is that it came into being in response to the Summer of the Gun. Not quite, otherwise it may have come earlier on. It came after December 26th, the Boxing Day shooting. A time of year when nothing ever gets done legislatively, nothing ever gets done in terms of budgetary allocations, but the provincial government, which at the time was claiming fiscal austerity, took only 9 days to put together a $51 million so-called anti-crime package, and TAVIS was a part of that. So you just imagine an incident, 9 days later, here's $51 million. It's my understanding that in the downtown east side, there's supposed to be a shelter, 24-hour shelter, which is yet to be established. So you can see how slowly they move, or how quickly they move, depending on who they're dealing with. So at any rate, TAVIS is, again, supposed to be directed towards violent individuals. At its inception, January, February, March 2006, there were police officials making a host of distinctions, right? On the one hand, you have the ordinary people. On the other hand, you have the predatory people. We're going after the predatory people. So the rest of you don't have to be worried about our presence in your communities. So the implication was that they'd be going after the predatory people, so-called, and everyone else would be left alone. But unsurprisingly, given the reality of police property and how the police function towards their quote-unquote property, TAVIS is committed to essentially generalized harassment and intimidation and criminalization of powerless people who lack friends in high places. And the police actually, interestingly enough, when you do some sort of against the grain readings of police statements and police documents, they actually admit it to a certain extent. They're not really concerned with criminal activity per se. So we turn to a September 13th, 2009 article in the Toronto Sun entitled "A Night on the Streets with TAVIS." Now again, one of the catalysts for TAVIS is supposed to be gang activity. We're going after gang members. But the police aren't satisfied with that narrow focus, and they justify it in the following manner. A constable by the name of Sarju says, with reference to gang members, quote, they're maturing, they're getting smarter, the urban clothing is different, they can dress up really nice. So one is wearing, you know, a nice pair of slacks, a 4-button cardigan, a fresh haircut, but you could still be a gang member, so we're gonna still go after you. That's one of the means by which the target selection becomes more and more broad. And he says, in addition to that, he says that we have to talk to everybody as a result of that. Exchange the word talk with the word confront, and you have a better sense of what they're talking about. We're going to confront everybody who we don't like. The Toronto Police, as well, in response to some of the controversies around contact carding, formulated a report, which is regarded as a wonderfully nice, liberal, enlightened report, known as the PACER report, in which they state on page 36, they state that this, we're not, primarily concerned with wrongdoing. They say data collection is not always for the purpose of a specific investigation, nor is it done because the subject from whom data is being collected is in fact a target of suspicion of wrongdoing. So they say it doesn't have to be any specific investigation, doesn't have to be any suspicion, doesn't have to be any wrongdoing, we'll still go after you. Generalized harassment directed towards police property. Now, when we look at the data as well, not just the statements issued by the police, but when we look at the data with respect to contact cards, and TAVIS makes a very important contribution to the practice of carding, we can just do some comparisons, right? Are the police really preoccupied with serious criminal activity, or are they preoccupied with petty matters? In one year, 2010, and this is actually understating the matter because carding was higher in 2012, but this is 2010 data, under the absolutely meaningless category of general investigation, the police filled out contact cards 158,000 times under that category, or just over 3,000 times a week. That's as close as you can get as an admission of arbitrary detention, general investigation. So 3,000 times a week for general investigation in 2010. For the more serious crime of hold-up, people being held up with guns, etc., they filled out 125 contact cards, or 2.4 times a week. 3,000 times a week general investigation, 2.4 times a week hold-up. Another example, very serious offense of loitering. 10,885 contact cards filled out in connection with loitering. It's about 209 times a week. And in contrast, organized crime, they filled out 42 cards, less than once a week. 209 for loitering, less than once a week for organized crime. One more example. Under the category squeegee kid, panhandler, street person, filled out 5,399 contact cards, 103 times per week. And in contrast, with respect to homicide, they filled out 153 cards in connection with homicide. 103 times for street person, panhandler, squeegee kid per week, and about 3 times per week for homicide. So the concept of police property, the statements issued by the police themselves, and the statistical data all points in one direction, and this direction which you're all familiar with, right? That this organization which builds itself as serious about violent crime, these wonderful paladins of public safety, spend more time dealing with general investigation, loitering, squeegee kids, panhandlers, and street persons than hold-ups, organized crime, or homicide. Now, in terms of TAVIS, there's much that can be said about TAVIS, but I think that by and large, my preference might be to save some time for questions and so forth. I would just conclude by saying that there are many people who take issue with the TAVIS, the acronym, what it means, the Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, because the notion of anti-violence embeds within it an assumption of virtue, right? So if you're against TAVIS, well, TAVIS is anti-violence, are you pro-violence? That's the implication. But I don't really have a problem with the acronym. I think we can stick with the T, the A, the V, the I, the S, and instead of speaking about TAVIS, the Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, we might talk about the Toronto Anti-Violence Illusion Strategy, because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that are part and parcel of the processes by which TAVIS is marketed, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to see right through the illusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Just to let people know that at the end we're not going to do a Q&A. Our plan is that we really want people in the community to talk to each other. That part of the ways in which that they pit us against each other, they make divisions amongst us in our neighborhoods, and then you see people rally out against homeless people in the neighborhood or people who use drugs, and what we're hoping is that people can come together. So we're going to serve dessert, we're going to have coffee and tea, and that people can talk to the speakers. We also have people here who can fill out forms for anyone who's been harassed by the police or who's been carded to document that. They're going to be in the side down there. There's going to be a lawyer here, Davin, who's going to be also down the side over there, who can talk to people if people have any legal questions. So Frank Coburn was supposed to be here, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. He had an emergency. And I'm just going to, Frank was going to talk about drugs and homelessness in the neighborhood. So I'm just going to fill in on the fly. But also as someone who's been doing harm reduction and drug user organizing for over a decade in the downtown east, Chris talked about carding and ticketing. And carding and ticketing, we went out the other day and we were talking to people doing outreach, and people talked about police just rolling up and asking them questions, that whole good cop, bad cop thing, being real nice. And carding people, ticketing people. There's a man that I work with in my job who has $40,000 of outstanding tickets for panhandling. That is something that TAVIS uses as a tactic of harassment of people in this neighborhood, and people here probably experience that themselves. But carding and ticketing is discrimination. It's a form of discrimination. It's a form of oppression in this neighborhood. And how the hell are poor people who are panhandling going to pay even a $75 ticket, let alone $40,000? So I think it's important to know about drug policy in this country and what drug policy and how drug policy even started. So the criminalization of drugs was never about people's health. It was never about people's safety. It was actually, the first drug laws were passed by the labor minister in 1908. And those drug laws were it's actually called the Opium Act. And the Opium Act was created in response, it was actually a racist act that targeted Chinese workers, and it started because of a riot in the downtown east where 10,000 white workers, white people went on a riot, and they targeted Chinese stores, and no store was left without rocks through the window, without vandalism, without targeting the Chinese community. So the labor minister in the early 1900s drafted the Opium Act, and the Opium Act really only targeted people of color, and it went on like that for about 40 years. And then there were different acts that continued, and then we had the war on drugs. So the war on drugs, as people know, has been raging for 50 years. And that war has been devastating to many communities. We have seen people that we know and love locked up. We've had friends and family members overdose and die. And we know that the drug laws have caused more harm to our communities than good. And so while we expand prisons, so our crime rates have dropped since the 70s, and I think everyone in this room probably knows that actually what people go to jail for is non-violent crime. And we have a crap load of people sitting on remand. People who are sitting there, who haven't gone to trial, who are serving out time inside our prisons, waiting to go to trial. So they may serve, there's people I know who served out 1.5 years and then their charges have been dropped and they've been released, but they served time. They served time, and that's time you cannot get back. And I'm sure there's people in this room who've experienced that as well, and it is not right. So we have the first super jail built here in Toronto. It's the first one of its kind. It's total shame, the Toronto South Detention Centre. And that's really filling up with people who are targeted for non-violent crimes. And so, there's people who are targeted around drug possession, marijuana possession, such a benign thing as having a joint on you or a couple grams of pot, in my opinion. But these laws are really created to target young people of color. They're to target indigenous people, homeless people, poor people. They don't go after organized crime. Drug laws do not go after organized crime. And anyone who believes that doesn't really know how it all works. This is about oppression, it's about repression, it's about targeting communities, it's about keeping people in their jobs, it's about keeping the court system going and the cops going. And so that's something we need to start uniting against. When we hear communities go after, we hear homeless people all called addicts, and you hear people mobilizing to stop poor services in this community or to stop new housing. We need to mobilize together. We need to be in solidarity together to stop that kind of discrimination. Everyone deserves housing, everyone deserves programs. We've had massive cuts in this neighborhood, and when we went out and talked to people on the street, people said, I need a home, I need an income, I need a job. We have youth unemployment at what, 24% in this country? It is not looking good for young people. So we need to start building solidarity amongst each other. So when they come in and they roll in, we are together and united. That's young men of color who are being targeted, homeless people being targeted. So I'm hoping that in the end people will talk to each other. And so that when the next time that they decide to have a meeting in the Daniels Center for their new condos against a methadone clinic, the people who maybe didn't come out in support of come out and supporting people around that issue, get educated and come out and support people who might need that, and stop the vilification and the stigmatization of people who use drugs. Because there's many, many reasons why someone might be using drugs, but there's lots of reasons why people are on the streets. And that has a lot to do with our government, and it has a lot to do with how they do not want to invest in people, or in resources, or in housing, but they keep building and building and building, and there is so much development around here. And so the Pan Am Games is going to happen, and we know that this is not the end of the sweeps of this neighborhood. The Pan Am Games is going to target more people down here, but they can put millions, they can find hundreds of millions of dollars for Pan Am Games. But they cannot find hundreds of millions of dollars to get people out of shelters and into homes. So when TAVIS targets communities, that's who they're targeting. They target people who spill out on the streets because the shelter kicks them out at 7:30 in the morning. They target people who are living in substandard housing, who have no air conditioning in their home and have to go outside because it's too damn hot in their apartment. Or maybe they're targeting the community just hangs outside their building because that's what communities and neighbors do together. But that's what TAVIS does in this neighborhood. They roll up on you at 251 Sherbourne or 155 Sherbourne. They don't want you sitting outside, ticket you. It's bullshit and it's harassment. We can think of so many ways that millions of dollars could go back into this community, and it is amazing to see so many people here. So I encourage people, again, like if you have been harassed or you have been carded, to go out and talk to folks on the side. I strongly encourage people to stick around and talk to each other, because that's, I'm so serious about this. It's about division, and we actually need to be building solidarity with each other, getting to know our neighbors, building resistance in our own communities, and looking out for one another. Thank you.
The last two people that spoke are just, sorry, my voice is loud but not that loud, yeah? I just really want to say the first two speakers in the room, they have to inspire you to take that moment at the end of the night and speak to at least one person, yeah? And find out another story. Find out what someone else is supporting in this room around their needs and what it is that they might be able to do to assist you in your protection within this community. I want to talk a little bit. Everybody knows there was a shooting in the community the other day. It's not a secret. CP24 runs it as a little bit, whatever. Okay, so now if we look at the corner, and I've been out a few nights just really trying to get a sense of how TAVIS is spending my money. Okay? It's my money, and I want it now. Isn't that what the commercial says? So here it is now. Look at what they've done since the shooting. People can't even go in their apartments. Why are you stopping people outside? We live there. What is the point of that? If TAVIS was really about anti-violence, the shooting wouldn't have happened. The shooting wouldn't have happened. And now, all of we who walk through the corner need to look at some strange faces that look like us, they're dressed like us, they're feeling cool on the corner, yes, I live in the community. They're all police officers. They're straight, give me my money, at least half of your 5 million, and let me do better than you. TAVIS tells me that they are about building strong communities and better relationships with communities, and more particularly the black community. You're failing. Peter Slowly, you're failing. Alok Mukherjee, you're failing. Chief Blair, you gotta go, boy. Oh God, you're failing. You're failing. And you're not just failing these communities. It's all throughout this province. We're under attack every day. Youth have no economic opportunities at all. Individuals that live on the street, when the police walk through the park, they're walking through some people's home. Excuse me, I live here, take off your shoes and leave mine. Leave mine behind it, leave my shoes. And the way that these police are carrying on really needs to come to an end, yes? And if we unite, if everyone in this room makes a deep commitment before you walk through the final door, I'm going to talk to one person. I want to hear your story. What is it that you feel in the community? Because the only way to unite is one by one by one, and we're all marching. We all have the same rhythm. We all have the same needs. Some of our needs can be united across the board. Not all of them, but many of them are united across the board. So now I want to take that hat off. That's the Vickie McPhee rights. I'm so tired of the police bullshit, yes? I'm so tired of it. My son is 12. He's their primary candidate right now. The other night he went to the park and he left the park with a friend to go get a juice, but he didn't call me. Sorry son, you're grounded, because if you don't do that, and Bubba will come and roll up on you, and my son knows, I'm an Indigenous, 7th generation, African First Nations man, you can't talk to me. And my son can't say it, but he knows it. And his attitude will show it. And they don't like the attitude. So now my son becomes a victim. Eh? I want to share my story on victim. Even before it was profiling, even before the concept of profiling was even on the docket, even before carding, July 25th, 1985, I was in my home. And I'm pretty humble, but I like to rumble, yeah? The police come in, apparently they mistook me for somebody else. I was stripped naked, tied down and beaten for 3.5 hours. So needless to say, my experience is in my soul, you feel me? I take it with me. And at the end of it, I'm supposed to understand, oops, we thought you were somebody else. Wow. I am so glad it happened to me and not the person that they intended it for. How dare you? And let me tell you, the hospital in Gayson, Toronto East General Hospital, even if I'm bleeding and almost dead, please don't take me to that hospital. Please. You feel me? Yep. So now that hat's gone, and I want to talk about McPhee. I've been a member of McPhee, not for very long, but I have to say the work that they do is the work that we require for the unity of all communities across Toronto. Yes? So I just want to take a minute and read what is called the Statement of Unity with McPhee.
What's McPhee?
McPhee, I'm sorry, is the Network for the Elimination of Police Violence. Thank you for keeping me on track. Everybody's supposed to know who McPhee is. No. McPhee is the Network to Eliminate Police Violence. Everybody knows now. Yes? Get connected. Okay? So here it is. The mission statement and the base of unity. I don't like to feel attached to nothing. I like to be free, yes? Here you go. So here it is. We are the network of organizations coordinating community-based response to police violence. That's why everybody's in the room right now. We are not going to continue to tolerate and be silenced and be policed and priced or pushed out of our communities. It's not going to happen. We're not going to stand for it. We're not quiet. We're united. We stand behind the following Number 1, we strive to build the capacity of communities to resist police violence. That's why we're all in the room. Love it, yes? It makes sense. Number 2, we strive to build principled unity. Before you leave the room, everyone speak to one person. Drop the liberalism, yes? Okay.
I was happy.
Pardon?
No, it's okay.
Okay, sorry. Among communities to resist, fight, and eliminate police violence. We're coming after your money, TAVIS. We're coming after your money. We need to take your money from you because you're not servicing us, yes? We hold harassment, intimidation, surveillance, carding, planting of evidence, racial profiling, excessive force, police brutality, entrapment, provocation, concealment of evidence, and other repressive actions as acts of police violence. Don't handcuff me and then set your jog on me. Don't clear the streetcar, then shoot me, and then put a taser on me. Don't do that. That's just wrong. Your grandmother ought to know it's wrong, so you ought to know it's wrong, yes? Yes. We recognize racism as a system. All racism, all ism, yes? As a system that shapes and informs police violence against and in racialized and indigenous communities. We view police violence as a basic part of society because it is used to serve and protect the interests, the dominant privileged groups in society. So the numbers that our brother gave us tonight really show us that's a simple principle. If everybody in this room knows that and you tell one other person, that's all we need to start to build the capacities within our communities. The last point, number 7, we believe that the elimination of police violence will come about with the end of all systems of oppression and repression in this society. If you agree, show me your hand. If you agree, show me your hand. Before you walk out of the room, talk to one other person that you saw put up your hand, yes? Perfect. So there's another piece of the brilliant work that McPhee is involved in. And this is why, if we unite, we can stop the police from coming through our community. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my specific neighborhood, if you will. Yes? Okay, so here we are. We have created, McPhee has created the Network for the Elimination of Police Violence. Everybody knows who they are. You'll get connected, yes? Filming the police, it's a basic guide to do so. And the reason that this book is so important to everybody here is that not many people have iPhones. Many people have the Android phone or other phones. McPhee has created an iPhone app. It's Cop Watch Toronto, yes? Okay. And that app allows you to film the police from a safe distance where it doesn't in any way cause you harm. And as you close it, you send it right up to YouTube, as well as connecting and informing the network, McPhee, the Network for the Elimination of Police Violence, yes? And having that video. And what that allows us to do is then post that and show that. We can create and have utility with those kinds of filming. And right now, if we could film what's going on outside right at Sherwood and Dundas. Wow. Oh, can you feel me? We could eliminate some nonsense going on right there, right? Yeah. When I go to the store to get juice and milk and a bag of chips for my son, please don't ask me where I'm going, because I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to walk in the store, I'm going to get what I came for, and I'm going to come out. You're not going to worry about me, yes? You're not going to touch me, you're not going to cuss me, you're not going to handcuff me. Because it's wrong, and my spirit is going to show you that it's wrong. Eh? Even if you charge me, I'm still going to stand my ground. Eh? I'm not going to shoot you or chase you and pretend that you chased me. I'm just going to do it the way it is. I'm going to let you know I'm not having it. I'm not in it. You're not going to do it to me. Yes? So again, before I hand the mic back to my co-moderator, Zoe, everybody before you leave has to talk to one other person, yes? Yes. Thank you everybody.
I just wanted to invite Sigrid up here. I think Kathy and Joan are also coming up. So Sigrid is an Indigenous woman who lives in this community from the downtown east. She's also an OCAP member. And women have been, like last year there was a rape at the corner of Sherbourne and Dundas of a homeless woman. And women got organized in this community when the police didn't respond and went out and flyered the neighborhood and let women know. And women have been fighting for safe space and 2 24-hour drop-ins in response to the sexual violence that happens in this neighborhood. These women have been involved in that. It's been pretty awesome to be involved with them. But they're also going to speak to some of the work that they've been doing in the neighborhood.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. Zoe wants us to give a little profile about ourselves, so I'll go first, and then there's Sandikwe and Joan. My name is Sigrid. I am a First Nations person, and I live at Nishnawbe Homes, which is a rooming house on Church Street, and there's 60 First Nations people living there in rooms. So we are totally underhoused. I joined the women's group. I see Chantal there. We went out after women were sexually assaulted in this neighborhood due to lack of shelter space. It happened last October, but it's happened way before that too. So that brought us to us petitioning the city for the 24-hour women's drop-in. And it's been a long, hard fight with them, and they still haven't put it in the budget. So we will still be going after that, so that women are not sexually assaulted because they have nowhere to sleep, no shelter space that they feel safe. I'm going to talk a little bit about TAVIS from what I know from doing street patrol with Kathy, Sandikwe, Davine, and Joan in this neighborhood when it first came out. I first learned of it through an agency here down the street. I went to a meeting, and we didn't even know that this was coming into our neighborhood. There was the Business Association and the Neighborhood Association. They knew about it first, and they had meetings with the police, with 51 Division before we did. So I went to this meeting and found out about it, and then decided to do this patrol on the very night that they started. What I know about TAVIS is they spend a lot of money for what they're doing, and they did not stop the murder on George Street. And what the police said, one was a sergeant, Joan was at the meeting, the initial meeting, they said they were only going to target sexual assault, B&Es, murder, assaults, and that's not what I see out there. I see them targeting people that are riding their bikes on the sidewalk and other different infractions. What we need is housing. I need housing, right? I need housing as a First Nations person. It's a shame that I have to live in a room, right, on my own territory. And they're spending money on TAVIS, on these police. Kathy and I and Davine, we just did an action this afternoon, a little demo in front of the Toronto Stock Exchange. And there was about 12 police sitting under the trees, doing nothing, just watching us as we were peacefully singing and drumming. So that shows you where the dollars are going. They are not stopping sexual assaults in the neighborhood. They are doing these ticketings like I'm saying. What I know about this is the numbers. Those numbers don't add up to me. From what they said at that first initial meeting to what I know, they're spending way too much money. And a lot of people in this room and beyond, they do need housing, people that we see. I walked through Allen Gardens on Sunday morning. It was about 10 o'clock. I counted 13 people still sleeping, and I know from doing the street patrol, I know who's sleeping and who's just resting. Because I do go to the park. Joan and I go to the park lots of times to rest, to just take it easy. And so I know the difference when somebody's sleeping in the park, and there was 13 people sleeping in that park on Sunday morning. Too many. So I'm going to hand it over to Santaque, and she's going to talk a little about the patrolling and what she's seen when we go out patrolling at night. Thank you.
My name is Kathy. That's my slave name. My spirit name is Strong-Hearted Woman. And I'm a Anishinaabe Nation Bear Clan. And what I've seen is a lot of displacement of people in this neighborhood. Actually, my husband and I, we live in Parkdale, which is another area that's affected by poverty and police brutality. But we actually started patrolling in the East End because that's where a lot of First Nations people are. But we don't just cater to the First Nations people, we cater to everyone. We actually serve anyone. And we've had literally 2 donations of $60 each. And with that $120, we have fed over 200 people. We have given kits of needles and pipes to hundreds and hundreds of people. We have done walking around, doing patrol. We've actually done first line, first aid care. In fact, there was a gentleman on George Street that literally died in my arms a couple weeks ago. We were there for that. We actually are the buffer between police because a lot of people don't even want to call the police to get help. They're afraid. And when they're lying on the ground with blood or they're passed out, the last thing that they want to do is deal with a cop. And so I've been holding their hands and saying, don't worry, I'll make sure that the cops don't come near you. And we've actually laid down with men who have passed out and are waiting the ambulance while police just sit there and look and look their nose down at them, because to them, it's a drug addict, it's an alcoholic, it's a homeless person. But to us, it's a human being. The people that had the tickets, the infractions, the tickets for riding a bicycle and not having a light, or not having a bell, or maybe they just happened to go on the sidewalk because they were heading onto their building, were harassed for about 15-20 minutes. We stood there and watched the cops, and they were ticketed for $300. Each ticket was $300. So where is the average person going to come up with that money? So these people are targeted. It's minorities, First Nations people, poor people, anyone that's, it's not the average white, rich person on Bay Street. Our super jails aren't being filled with them, which is the whole purpose of what TAVIS was supposed to be. And in fact, a friend of mine, she went to the picnic that was supposed to be for the condo people, and a cop actually told her, because she was looking nice that day, told her, well, since you live in the condo, then you should agree with us that we want to clean the streets. They didn't say anything about getting rid of murderers and rapists, and and in fact, it's us that are doing the postering for every time there's a sexual assault or a woman missing, or even a man missing. It's not the cops. So TAVIS isn't saving anyone except their jobs.
Yeah.
My name's Devine.
You can do the passing there.
Help
Take one
women
interested, if not, passing.
because I'm a hereditary chief. It's my responsibility as a man to uphold the great law of peace, which is the true law of the land. Also, as Indigenous people, we have the first and foremost right to police our lands, to govern our lands, to see what's happening on our territories.
North, south, east, and west.
One thing I can say is, since we've been down patrolling and helping the people, that we've helped at least one person a night, whether it's with clothing, food, ambulance, CPR, whatever, friendship. We've been very successful. The people on George Street respect us. They know that we're not there to tell them what to do. We're just there to make sure that they're safe. Because we don't want the people being abused on our territories. And we know that the people choose to do certain activities, and we respect that, but we just want to make sure that the people are safe. And what happened was, as I was with my healer, and Sigrid and myself were standing outside Anishinaabe Health, and he told us about 6 women who had disappeared on the street.
Yeah.
And most of the people I hear that are disappearing are young women that are in their teens.
Right.
14, 15, 16, 17, no older than 19. So this concerns me. And so my healer said, what are we going to do? And so I told him, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know what I'm going to do. So taking responsibility on our territory is one of the first and foremost things. But under the great law of peace, which is the true law of the land, which I stated before, states that the women are the true holders and the true decisions of what happens on our streets. I'm just there to help them and protect them and stand beside them and help to assist them in anything that they need. And it's an honor to stand with these 3 women, especially my friend Joan, Sigrid, and my lovely, lovely wife, Songdakwe. All right, thank you.
I'm very honored to be here with my friends and all of you. We've seen a lot on the streets, and we've helped a lot, as my friends are saying. I've gotten donations from the woman for bottled water. We've made sandwiches. I've got donations for pants, shirts, make kits, and then we go to public health to get condoms. And I've got my own clothes and sleeping bag to give to the homeless women, and they cry and they're so happy they were there. We sit on the ground and we smudge with them, we talk to them. And there's been about 3 or 4 that have gone to get help and tried to go get places. And pamphlets of where to get help for drug and alcohol addictions. It's a lot of work, but we have to do it. Just, we have to patrol. And that's it, because I'm going to cry.
I just want to say one thing. That night that the murder happened on George Street, we stayed out all night. I think it was, when I got home, it was about 6:30. I think these guys got back to Parkdale probably about 8 o'clock. It wasn't only that happened. There was many people, because the street was blocked off, and so they couldn't go back to their home. Seton House is their home, and they couldn't go back there. So we saw them in Moss Park, we saw them in Metropolitan, the church park there, and we saw them in Allen Gardens. There was people displaced that night. They were traumatized by what happened. They were sad. And they needed food and water. They were just sitting out there with their belongings, and they couldn't go back home to Seton House. And we saw them. Yeah, it was very, very sad to not only know that a person had passed on there that night, but also that there was a lot of people that were displaced and kind of traumatized and stressed out by what happened, and very sad. So it affects many, many people, not just one person that passes on. It affects like a whole community, because many of us in this room probably still haven't recovered from that. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, like, this is a really good example of people just taking action within their own community. They're not part of a social service organization. They're doing it themselves, and I think that is so powerful, and it shows how we can resist in our own communities, organize in our own communities, and look out for one another. So thanks, guys. And I just wanted to highlight too that Seton House and George Street, Seton House there are plans for Seton House to be redeveloped. So that whole strip is a plan for redevelopment, and it's a loss of hundreds of shelter beds. And it's also, there are houses next door who, there's people in this room who live in houses that have been facing some real massive police violence, with police coming in their homes with the ETF, flashing guns at them, intimidating them. And this is the kind of oppression that goes on from their homes to like 155 Sherborne, where you walk down one hallway and you see all of the temporary doors from people's doors being kicked in. People do not deserve to live like that. People should not be having to live like that. So I'm going to let Vickie introduce our last speaker, and thanks for holding out so far.
Again, everybody, just make some noise. We're all united in the room. I just love to see everybody all the way to the back. Thank everybody for being here. So now that everybody has had a chance to hear me blither blather, I'm going to clean up some of my blither blather, right? So off the top, I talked about the Cop Watch Toronto app. It is on the iPhone, and the creator is Darren Baptiste, who is in the room here. Thank you for the solidarity. Yes, solidarity, for sure, for sure. The next thing is making sure that everyone who did sign in and place an email or a phone number, I'm going to give out the contact information for McPhee, the Network for the Elimination of Police Violence, but also making sure that that information is shared with you and you can access it at will. So first of all, you can find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/NEPV Toronto, on Twitter @NEPV Toronto, and also at email, eliminatepoliceviolence@gmail.com. Yes? Making sure we're connected and in solidarity and moving forward to take our money away from those that stole it from us just to beat up on us. Give me back my money. You didn't spend it right. And so the last thing that I wanted to clean up, there's a flyer here for the next event that McPhee's setting up. I'm going to put a pile on each side and everybody just pass it till it gets to the back, making sure that we are connected, yes? Yeah? So now I'm going to introduce our finale, a sistren with power and consideration. Butterfly is from the Jane-Finch Action Against Poverty, and she does a lot of work up in that community. And of course, solidarity is why we're in the room. That's why everybody's all the way here, all the way to the back. So Butterfly, come up and empower us, sis.
I'm always scared when I talk to the police. So that's something hold the mic for me. We talk right into it. Right. We're good. Are we good? Everyone in here?
I know there's time, people want time to talk and stuff, so bear with me. I was trying to cut it down while we were going through, so yes, my name is Butterfly. I'm a resident. Speak up? Yeah. Okay. All right. My name is Butterfly. I'm a resident, a mother, community worker in the occupied territories of Jane-Finch. Before starting, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. This is really beautiful to see downtown East organized and rolling so deep. It's really awesome. Being real with you all, it's really nice feeling to be up here. I find myself vexed, traumatized, and frustrated that I'm still here. This is a decade and a half for my fight and decades before me. Sorry? Okay. All right, we'll keep it going. We tried 5 years ago the Cop Watch idea. Intellectually, we had some headway. People realized that they could film the police, and there were 1 or 2 cases where people did pull out their phones and saved a resident from an ass-kicking. There were moments when it got too much, and we ended up marching down to 31 Division and telling them straight we're watching them as much as they're watching us. It even worked out for a bit before they resumed their normal diet of repression. Some of our residents tried it and fight back.
but some of them got screwed in the process.
Naturally.
When you mention police brutality to 31 Division, you know chances are you're going to get a good dose of police brutality. Some of us learned it the hard way, and sadly, some residents learned it the most hardest and brutal ways imaginable. At this point, I used to spell out the horrors of police brutality by one of the most heavily militarized units in North America. But forgive me, I'm done with the whole poverty porn thing. Trauma and suffering that has been projected onto my village, community, my loved ones. I'm tired of making myself vulnerable, exposed to trying to tell the truth, while the actors of violence continue unchallenged. If we get to a point in time where these stories I share publicly can directly improve the lives, safety, and liberty of my people, then I'll share it. Until then, I want us to focus on specifically the importance of what Cop Watch can be as a response to TAVIS, and how we as a city can watch the cops and talk candidly about some of the barriers we face to watching them. In Jane-Finch, we've entertained a number of approaches. We've had small successes, considering how massively under-resourced we are. We've done protests, Know Your Rights workshop, including street theater, class action, lawsuits, popular education. Some residents have tried mediation, but that's always been on the police terms. Letters have been sent back and forth between community and police, but letters with little substance, not enough to suggest that the police as a force are seriously considering in changing its addiction to enforcement and control by any means necessary. Sadly, the majority of these movements fail to gather any sustained momentum. Taking our plans for Cop Watch as a case study is what I want to draw perhaps we'll draw out some of the issues why it stifled this momentum. All right, so the police have absolute control in this, that they can kill us, and they probably will get away with it. The fear levels are huge. Many people want to stand up for justice and are happy to face the consequences, but the police don't just go after them, they go after their families. I was 8 months pregnant when the police came after me and said that, or threatened that the police were watching me and I should be careful. With an 18-year-old black son, I cannot begin to tell you what that feels like. If Cop Watch is to work, who is going to be there to stand up for the watcher or the recorder? And their families when it gets ugly. We can disarm the police. It would help reduce the absolute power, dynamic gratefully, if allies as well as residents can mobilize people to support this. This would be an amazing victory. This brings me to allies. People who are not from the community but wish to help. There needs to be a conversation and balance between outside allies supporting us but not taking over the process, which has to be a community-driven. Our community does not need the protection of privilege that is afforded to the middle-class, predominantly white activists, who despite being our allies, will more likely not receive the same violent consequences that our communities will. Many lawyers offer the support, but that's 9 to 5, not 24 hours like the police. We need a whole host of supports for the watcher and the watcher's family, and not just legal support. Areas to look at regarding allyships could look like how to challenge the media onslaught against our communities, bring more resources in to allow communities to organize childcare, training spaces, catering, access to materials, lawyers, media outlets, develop their abilities to listen to community and not tell us what to do. There's a whole list of things I could share. I'm trying to go fast. The beatdown. Community organizers are fighting so many battles that they're trying to build effectively. Can logistically be impossible. Time, money, life, internal politics, and fatigue can greatly hinder these movements. Sadly, the police have lots of time and lots of money to allow them to hold it down a lot more easily.
How can we build strength and get the time and confidence to do this remains sadly unanswered to me. We did have some good conversations about a counter ad campaign against the police, but that too failed. I offer up these questions for us to talk about it. I'm not trying to be grim about the fight, I'm trying to be real about it. Isolation and feeling like you're fighting this alone has been what we've been dealing with uptown. It's time that the city comes together. It's time we push back, and we can't do it alone.